This is Mommy's Hot Adoption by Gavos112. A small boy, living a normal life, suddenly gets a big change delivered on him when he meets a Charmeleon. Over time, things get very, very odd for him as he discovers a whole new world. Warning: Rated M for lemons, pedophilia, and pokophilia. Genre: romance/family. Okay. I was just a small boy when it happened. I was about 7. Still running around trying to figure out the world. I had a pretty protected life, and I loved it. But hey, there's no such things as perfect lives. I found out one day too late. I cursed myself every day for falling into that trap. That horrible, sexy trap. Maybe I should start out from the day it happened. I was out feeding the herdier as my daily chore. I never had a problem with it in my life, except after it was introduced to me. My herdier wasn't always so friendly back then, but now, at my young age of 7, he's grown to like me. I'd come out every day and fill his bowl. He'd eat a portion and trot over to me for a scratching behind his ears. Yep, a dog was a man's best friend, all right. Too bad he wasn't there for me when the tragedy came. Now that I think of it, I think it started right here. I just so happened to look up and see a dark red fiery lizard Pokemon. A Charmeleon. It studied me curiously as I fed herdier. Now, I assumed it was a she only from its eyes. I was obviously way too young to learn about Pokemon anatomy. Turned out later on, I was right. I went inside and pushed the slider door to a close. The Charmeleon was still eyeing me carefully, though. I shrugged it off and went on with the rest of my day. And by that, I mean video games. Oh, how I loved them. Their pixel screens, their cool music, and most of all, their stories. I was always intrigued about the producer's imagination while making the game. It was always just so interesting to see. Honey, time for dinner. I smiled ear to ear. That happened to be my mother, the sweetest woman in the entire world. My friends always wanted a mother like her. Turned out I was the lucky one. Anyway, I paused my game of Sonic Adventure Battle 2, which was my favorite game on the GameCube, and raced downstairs. What was my delicious treat going to be this time? A plate was put in front of me. I smiled even wider. I felt like the Joker, grinning insanely wide at my precious prize lasagna. I had a deep love for lasagna, though it couldn't be games and Mom. My family kept teasing me with my gluttony over lasagna. They called me names like Garfield and Pasta Boy. I didn't mind. It only persuaded me to eat even more lasagna. My meal got 10 times better with garlic bread. Cheese garlic bread. Really, it was toasted garlic bread with all sorts of cheeses melted on top and bottom of the bread. It was always delicious. I scarfed down my food, not bothering to savor the deliciousness. That was what I did often. When something was heavenly for my taste buds, I just ate quickly. It didn't mean I didn't taste the food. I sure as hell did, in fact. After dinner, it was time to start getting ready for bed. I put my happy plate into the sink and ran upstairs to turn off my game. After saving, of course, and run back downstairs to take my medicine. See, I have autism, which is not a very fun thing to deal with. In my case, it was minor autism. I had like a minority of Asperger's. To calm my mind down and keep it from melting down in tantrums, I had to take a medicine called Zoloft every night until my mind had matured to the point of full control of my emotions. It's been going so far, so good. I kissed my mom on the cheek and smiled up at her. "Good night," I said. She kissed back and embraced me in a hug. Good night, kiddo, she responded. I raced up to my room, flicked off the lights, and hopped into bed. I shifted into my most comfy position I could manage in my medium-sized bed and slowly drifted to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat. I thought I had heard something tapping on my window. Now, I was also pretty superstitious, and I believed in those stories about legendary Pokemon and stuff. My favorite one being Manaphy. I always liked that Pokemon. However, as I walked to my window, this was no Manaphy. It was the same Charmeleon from before, sitting at my window. She looked very, very anticipated for something. I wonder what. Being the kid I was, I opened up the window to the Pokemon. "Hey, are you cold?" I asked. I cursed myself for my stupidity. Fire types rarely get cold. The Charmeleon smiled widely and stepped into my room. A small smell of something caught my attention. I didn't really know what it was. It smelled slightly spicy. Those thoughts were cast aside when the Pokemon said, "Hey there, honey." Honey? Only one person called me that. That was my mother, and my mother alone. I jumped back. "You can't talk!" I almost shouted. The lizard Pokemon giggled. "Yes, I can talk. I was born to do just that. Now come on, sweetie. We gotta get you home." Home? What did she mean? I was home right here where I was. I inquired to her what she meant. She only continued to giggle. No time to explain. I got something to show you. She hopped right back in the window and beckoned me forth. I looked down at my clothing. My tidy whities. "I have to go get some clothes." The Charmeleon interrupted me with a claw to my mouth. "It's okay. You won't need your clothes. You're fine in what you have," she said warmly. I nodded and made the risky decision to climb out of my open window. The lizard Pokemon closed it behind me. God, why didn't I think about the lock from the inside? I thought I could return whenever we were done, but we didn't have the key. But I was just 7. I didn't know any better. She walked in the grass, making sure I was following her. I shivered in the cool air and followed behind her. I was getting pretty close to her pace so I can get the radiating warmth. It kept me at a nice temperature. I looked up and saw the looming forest. "We're going in there?" I asked. The Charmeleon looked at me oddly. "Why wouldn't we? It's very nice at this time of night. Now, let's hurry before it gets too dark." What was she talking about? Was it the moon or something? Again, being 7 years old had disadvantages. We walked into the forest. I was a little bit scared, I'll admit. But with Charmeleon, it didn't seem too bad. Not entirely. Then, we reached an area about a few yards from my home. Just a few trees and a patch of grass. We were invisible to the world. I looked at the fire lizard and asked, "What's the surprise?" She grinned at me and jumped onto my body. I let out a whimper as I fell to the ground. The Pokemon had me pinned to the soil. Her hips began to move seductively, but I didn't know what that really meant. I just looked fearful at her eyes. "Don't worry. Mommy's going to make you feel just fine." Mommy was here? I didn't know what that implied. I just squirmed, trying to get out of her reach. And then, it happened. She pushed her crotch down on my covered pelvis and moved her bum a little. I was frozen stiff at the feeling. In only a few seconds, my little member was rock hard and trying to free itself from my undies. Charmeleon grinned and swiped at my undergarments, and in about the same length of time, my cock went hard. My underwear was gone, replaced by a 3-inch young penis. Charmeleon licked her lips with her forked tongue. and began to grind her slit onto my tool. I winced in pleasure. What was she rubbing on my penis? It felt so wet and warm. And what? Being a child at the time, I had no idea what sex was. I opened my mouth to say something, but the Pokemon shushed me again. Mommy's going to make you feel very special and good. Just sit back and watch Mommy make you feel very good. I could only nod and accept what was coming to me. I'm not sure whether to feel upset or happy when this came, but it turns out the lizard Pokemon grabbed my little cock and slowly, ever so slowly, penetrated herself with it. I squirmed some more. What was she doing? I'm not sure if I entirely liked this, but it felt so good. Her forked tongue lapped at my neck as she slid deeper onto me. Within seconds, she was at the hilt. Oof, you're making Mommy feel really good. Ha! How do you feel? I was still kind of frozen. This was downright the best thing I've ever felt in my life. Her warm walls were squeezing on my dick like a vice, and all I could do was thrust my hips up very slightly and moan, "Mommy." She began to thrust back and forth into my crotch. I moaned louder and held her hips, trying to get more into her. "Mommy," I moaned in a daze of lust that was alien to my body. The Charmeleon grinned as she rode me much more faster. Already, I couldn't hold so much more. "Yes, dear, I'm your mommy. I'm always your mommy. And I'll make you feel good forever." Feel good? Like this? Forever? My mind was telling me to go back home and talk to my mom. But my libido was convulsing, yelling, "Oh, yes." All over the place, that dick, he's always much louder than any voice in my body, even mine. My eyes began to flutter open and close. Something was building up inside me, and I couldn't hold for long. I looked up at the lizard, who was only urging this release by pushing against me harder, much harder. It actually hurt my pelvis a bit, but it was mostly drowned by my pleasure. "Mommy," I moaned. My hips began to buck uncontrollably. "Now give all you got to your mommy, and we will feel really good. Go," she moaned as her arousal only created a nearing climax. "Come into mommy." I lost it there and then. Those words she said meant gibberish to me, but how they were said. It felt so good and warm. I pulled her close as I could and screamed, "Mommy." My little cock twitched inside of the Charmeleon and spurted out a small flow of my seed. I couldn't see it all. Did the Charmeleon just take all of it? I lay back, beginning to drift off. I looked into my new mother's eyes as she and all other vision were beginning to fade. "Mommy," I managed before blacking out. That was years ago. I am now 16 and the son of a Charmeleon. I do a few things for her in exchange for sex. I felt ashamed really to do such horrid things, but there was one thing I always loved about my new life. Make a guess. Mommy.